Hey everybody, it's Tripl-L coming in to talk about My Hero Academia chapter 294. I'm recording this on an early Monday morning, so hopefully it'll get to the channel by the afternoon. And apologies for the delay. I just a little bit under the weather, so that just slowed me down. Anyway, 294. Chapter where Mr. Compress finally gives us something about his character. The general notes are going to be focused around Mr. Compress, so that's going to be a really good one because I have some ideas there. But I just want to say, it's funny. Sometimes I see the comments everywhere, and it's like, "Come on, Horikoshi, just let this end, please. Just decide who wins. Is it the heroes or is it the villains? Please." It's just funny that we're all in this together at this point, and it's just like, Horikoshi, decide how many nuances how many notes do you want to have for this Horikoshi? Like that's really much. That's pretty much how I feel. Like, when are we out of here? Because at the end of the chapter, we end off with Shigaraki looking like he's about to wake up, and it's like, okay, Mr. Compress is trying to get away. Is his efforts gonna be for naught? Is Shigaraki gonna do something? Or even if Shigaraki does that mean in chapter what next week is 295? In 296, is it the heroes countering again? Is it just gonna be like this till chapter 300? God, please, no, no, please. No 300. If this is extended till 300, that's just gonna be aggressive, man. It's gonna be so aggressive. Let this end. But all that said and done, it was an interesting chapter. I don't think I have that many notes, or maybe I'm gonna ad lib a little bit more. But let's talk about Compress's reveal in general. When I look at this, and when we were looking at the spoilers coming out on 4chan when we were doing the live stream, it was really exciting. On Tuesday, we had talked about the fact that we still had the, what's his name? Harima? We still had that guy in the background as one of the foreshadowed villains, right? This is one of those pieces of information from Hero Academia that tells us that as long as this doesn't come out, we can say that the end of Hero Academia isn't nearby. So it was just really funny coming into this chapter, having talked about it, and then seeing it come out. So the first note here is going to be just about what Horikoshi is doing here. This is kind of concerning in that so many of the cards that we had before this arc are being played, right? Best Genist, Mirio, find the last character of the gentle villains coming out here as well. Finally, the relevancy coming back. It's concerning when you have so many of your cards being played out. Right now, the cards that we have on the table, a lot of them are cards that are being brought up in this arc. For instance, the issue with that other of the One for All users. That's a problem unique to this arc. As we go into the future, there are still some cards on the table that haven't been fully revealed, like Stain and All Might's visits at the prison. At that point, I do feel like we're gonna have some situations occurring at the prison, which is when you keep that in mind, it's like, well, what does that mean for what's going to happen next, that kind of thing. But it's just interesting at the rate that we're going with the pre-war arc plot points. What in chapter 295 to 96, could we actually realistically expect a traitor reveal? Yeah, pretty much we could, because it's a plot point. The traitor just seems like a natural thing, but it's also concerning that Horikoshi just throwing all these things out there on the table. It does feel like we're getting a lot sorted out. Now, when it comes to plot elements that give us a sense of how long the story is going to take, we do still have just the fact of the other hidden quirks. There's 5 quirks still that haven't been fully discovered. So that gives us maybe the idea of 5 more Izuku-centric arcs for those quirks to come out, if we were to try and apply some kind of logic there. But it is still it's still interesting that Horikoshi is throwing out so many of these plot elements, and it is a little bit concerning. When it comes to Compress's reveal, I am very happy that in chapter 291, I took the time to look at Compress's line about my word, another with quite the bloodline. I do believe in 291, and we can go back and look at it. I'm not going to look at it here. But in 291, I did mention that this sounded like this was a setup line. And look what happens. So in terms of this as a reveal, I think it is worthy criticizing that, Horikoshi, you set up this reveal. You have the element of this original thief, truthfully, from a while ago. You have it from Gentle, right? But you only prefaced 3 chapters out. That's not as impressive as a long-term plot reveal. I think it's fair to say that. However, when I'm looking at this compressed situation, honestly, my theory for this reveal is that Horikoshi most likely had this plot detail about compress made, not since the character's beginning, because if Toga's any indication, Horikoshi didn't have that much of a trajectory for these characters at the beginning, aside from Dabi. Dabi had his trajectory set pretty early on, given that he already had a communication with Shoto. But given that Toga had to be rewritten when she became popular, I doubt Compress had his trajectory set, given that Moonfish, Mustard, and Muscular didn't have they didn't have a strong future. I think the earliest we could say the trajectory was set was when Harima was first revealed by Gentle. But I feel that this information about Compress probably would have come out during Villain Academia if Villain Academia didn't get rushed at the end. Compress was one of the characters that got done a disservice in that arc, and when you look at it, Compress's reveals would have made sense in Villain Academia for a very simple reason. Compress and Redestro are actually very linked when you think about it. Not just from the fact that Gentle revealed them at the same time, but look at the characters. Both of the characters, Redestro and Compress, are legacies. They're legacies from these two villains that were introduced at the same time. They're both villains that were about reformation. And look at the way that Compress talks about Harima, or how he talks about his duty to him. Like, he says, what the line was, that righteous blood runs in our veins. Both Compress and Redestro have this rhetoric about their blood dictating what they do. And the contrast that you would have had Compress had this thing come out during Villain Academia would be like, well, you have Redestro, the legacy of one villain, being against Shigaraki, and then you have Mr. Compress, the legacy of another villain, who is just wholeheartedly without resistance on Shigaraki's side. Redestro does come around, but Redestro comes around by liberating himself from his bloodline, whereas Compress stays very much locked into his bloodline. So you can definitely see the comparisons. There's also the interesting note that it's interesting that in a small way, Compress is a rehash of the Redestro angle, that being the commonalities with the bloodline. But you shouldn't be saying rehash, because I think this would have been a pointed contrast had Compress talked about it in Villain Academia. Maybe Compress would have had more to do with Redestro at that portion of the fight in original Villain Academia. The point is, this rhetoric would have been a good contrast to Redestro at the time. So, that's going to be my little conspiracy theory, or my little developmental theory there. I do feel, given how similar their rhetorics are, Mr. Compress's reveals would have been better positioned during Villain Academia. And they probably would have happened in Villain Academia, given the attention that Toga and Twice received, had Villain Academia not been rushed at the end. And we can tell it was rushed just because of the way characters were treated across themselves. The big thing you should take away from here, though, is that Compress and Redestro are undoubtedly linked, not just because the villains that they were legacies of were introduced at the same time. They are, without a doubt, connected through rhetoric. Moving on, another point I want to say before going into the page-by-page walkthrough when it comes to this is just what exactly Harima was about. That being, Harima targets the fattened pockets of sham heroes. And it's just like, at this point, when you have Native, the character that Stain judged was never going to change and was not worthy of being a hero. When you have so many heroes putting down their lives, when you have heroes being shown in this chapter doing all that kind of stuff, the sham hero rhetoric, just for this part, like, honestly, the heroes deserve all the money they get. I mean, I doubt, well, actually, for the mid-tier heroes, I gotta be a little bit careful there. For the mid-tier heroes, I don't think they're making all that much money compared to someone like Endeavor. Honestly, I don't think that's the case. But I do feel the sham hero rhetoric doesn't land as well right now when all the heroes are dying in order to try and save people. Like, when you have heroes giving up their lives to make sure people can get out of the hospital safe, like, the rhetoric kind of falls down. I want to be careful here. Like, there's not to say there aren't any sham heroes, But at this point, it's not a good look. And it's definitely not a good look when you have Compress saying that the family is all about exposing injustice, and you have people Compress also saying that he was going for a reformation while putting back what he pilfered into the streets. It's like, Compress, you know, you're about exposing injustice, but you just ruined the lives of many kids and many families. I guess the big question is whether or not Harima would look at this and say that the society itself is committing an injustice by existing. I don't see injustice being exposed by bringing in the common folk here. This isn't how you reform society. This is how you make it worse. There's gonna be no peace here, I think. But we'll have to see. It all depends on what Horikoshi wants to sell here. What I'm looking forward to when it comes to the villains, honestly, is the day they realize their ideals don't lead down a good path. And I think the one that we're going to see that with is potentially Dabi. Anyway, let's get into the page-by-page walkthrough. How long did this first bit take? 12 minutes, not too bad. Okay, so let's go. So page 1 is Best Jeanist talking, and this is the setup and the actualization of what we were talking about for weeks. As you recall, for weeks I've been saying that when we look at Izuku's side is all about many people coming together and all these little actions making a positive difference. From the beginning of Exless all the way to Aizawa, all the way where every single hero that you see here, every single hero made a little movement that helped the plot along, helped the situation just a tiny little bit. And then the contrast at that time was that with Momo's side, you didn't get that same effect. It didn't feel like the heroes were making all that many differences. And then you had Momo, who was the epitome of, did she make a difference or not? And as you know, because of Momo's situation and seeing the successes that we had on Izuku's side, I was really hoping that Momo was going to get a win, which she got in the last chapter with Makia falling over. So what the author did in these first couple pages was just say it out loud that this was the theme that we were dealing with. The idea of many people coming together to make a difference at the conclusion. Everyone's efforts were worthwhile. This is what the author ultimately wanted to do. All the characters were valued. What Best Jeanist is telling us, we already kind of understand that because we saw that from Izuku's side. Is there value in Best Jeanist saying it out loud? Yes, there is 100% value. We can't take that away from the author. We can't say that that is a bad thing for the author to do, because the reality is a good chunk of vocal people with the Hero Academia fandom, unless you tell them things straight up, they're not going to understand it. And then when you consider the middle school demographic, it's probably better that Horikoshi just put it all out there so that everyone is on the same page. The fact is, canonically, this was the intended effect. It was intended to have a situation where multiple small efforts came together to make something bigger than every individual part. Only thing I want to say for this page is I feel that with the page with Crust, I think we could have afforded to put Exless in there because Exless ultimately minimized how many quirk bullets came out into the public. Exless made a big difference. Exless is related to Best Jeanist. I think it would have been appropriate to have him there. You have Manual there. I think Exless would have been fine to have in this page. A few other points on this page. Gran Torino is still alive given that people are still trying to save him, and also we see President Mike running back, which indicates that most likely the doctor has been taken away by the police. Looks like he's going to be coming back into the scene, and we'll have to see if he gets there in time. Page 2, Best Jeanist continues saying every effort was worthwhile, and we see other heroes. Mount Lady, she got some stuff stuck in her. It does seem like she's kind of shrunk given the tree trunk that's next to her for reference. So I would say that she's shrunken down. We also see Midnight. Midnight looks, this is actually a pretty concerning one because there's blood on the ground. And the last time we saw Midnight, it looked like she was still pretty healthy. I don't see any villains with her. I'm pretty concerned. Here we also see Endeavor and Izuku on the floor, and the Endeavor thing is set up for Dabi later. But yeah, I really hope Midnight's not dead, man. I hope at most she's just really badly injured. She definitely lost the fight because the last time we saw Midnight, she still had her mask on, so she got beaten up enough that her mask came off and got crumpled. Oh, I really hope she's okay. Moving on. Page 3 is a battle page. Aside from the art, what I want you to note is that Ida is caught between two Nomu, which is just impressive when you consider what Mirio says after this page. We go into page 4, a Meteor combat page, looks really good, with a Nomu that is honestly way more designed than it has any right being. Like, it's a cool looking Nomu, Anyway, page 4 and 5 both, they come together to give the Nomus context in terms of like their battle potential. And so at that point, I want to point you to the line where Emilio says, each one's got to be just as strong as the Nomu and Kyushu. When I see this, I'm thinking this is that classic Shonen Jump line that exists to just bump up the characters while also making something equivalent to the other. Shonen Jump does this a lot. Battle Shonens do this a lot. It's a way that they let people know how valuable the people in these fights are going to be. And what I want to say in this particular regard is that it's actually funny because I remember making the same observation when we were in that situation with the Endeavor and Hawks fight. What the author did, he had the character say like, oh man, the destruction here is comparable to Camino, and it's like, ah yes, you have to say that there to be able to say that Endeavor is involved in a fight to the scale of something that we had seen in Camino, right? There's always that level of equivalence coming in there. And because of the Shonen Jump escalation, you need to always be building these fights to be bigger and better. So that's what Meteor's line there functionally does. When Meteor comes in and says that, he's like, hey guys, this situation is as dangerous as that time Endeavor and Hawks fought. But then the added side effect here is that when you have Meteor talking about the speed and toughness being off the charts, and then you look at page 5 and you spot Ida in there, the idea that Ida is dealing with Nomu at the same level as the Nomu that Hawks and Endeavor fought with, when you consider that Ida was in between two of these Nomu, and when you consider that Ida has the time to look to the side and worry about Bakugo, it's like, holy crap, Ida! Shit, man! Good for you! Holy, you're dealing with two Nomu who are getting these accolades. Way to go, Ida. But yeah, what I really wanted to just point out there, that little line with Meteor giving context, it's appreciated, but it's something that Shonen Jump does pretty often, just to say that the characters are doing worthwhile new things, and just to say like, oh my god, yeah, this is as bad if not worse than the previous situation, right? It's just that escalation has to come in there. All that said and done, without a doubt, like Ida being able to do what he's doing, being between two villains and also being worried about Bakugo, that's an accolade. That's great for Ida. Even if he's not taking them out, the fact that he's surviving a flurry of Nomu, holy crap, that's amazing. Another thing for Ida, I love that Ida is still so earnest that he's saying all of Bakugo's name. I enjoy that, man. The rest of the page, I think it's still cool seeing the damage on Nejire. I do think she's going to get a haircut after this arc, unless she's the traitor. And then we have Best Jeanist having the worst time of his life with all the blood coming out as he's redirecting his resources towards the League of Villains. Page 6 is the beginning of the compressed page. And page 6, you know, it's just exposition. Page 7 is the beginning of an interesting monologue. I do enjoy how much Compress says that he likes Shigaraki. And it was also good to see where Toga is and that she's distraught. I'm still kind of rooting for Toga to be separated from the villains. But for Toga to be separated, that kind of does direct us into a particular path, but we'll talk about that in a bit. Page 8. What I love about this page is that Compress calls the League egotist. And I also like that he points out they don't pry into each other's past. Which legitimately is a good point, but at the same time, a good chunk of the League are insane, so it's not like I'm gonna give them much accolades for that, right? Like, they're crazy. I'm not gonna expect rational thought from crazy people. I mean, have you seen Dabi? Shit, man. You don't look at Dabi's face and say rational thought. Heck, I don't even think you could say coherent thought. Anyway, another thing that I thought was interesting, aside from Spinner's faces here, was that Compress wasn't aiming for a full runaway, but rather waking Shigaraki up. That is actually a pretty interesting distinction, because it looks like he's going for a counter as opposed to just a good escape, or maybe a counter that allows an escape. Page 9 is the Compressed sacrifice page, with him touching his butt and then ripping everything apart. And this was also the page where we have Compress talking about my blood duty, again, bringing the comparison to Redestro, who also felt like he had a duty because of his lineage. Page 10, we have Compress missing a little bit of a butt cheek, going ham, saving Shigaraki and Spinner. And then page 11 is interesting, because here's where you notice that Mirio had quite a bit of prominence in the chapter, and especially with him looking to what was going on. This page set up that Mirio was going to be the first one to reach Shigaraki. Also, I want to point out Ida's eyes here. It looks like Ida took notice. That eye looks very terrifying. Page 12, we had Best Jeanist binding compress. If only Best Jeanist could do this to Dabi and his seemingly fireproof clothing, but whatever. Compress in this page shows off his incredible control by just getting rid of his clothing without getting rid of more of his body. And here we finally see Skeptic, so I'm glad that the author actually didn't forget Skeptic. But it's interesting because Skeptic amounted to nothing. He's just kind of hiding there. There's no functional difference between having a Skeptic tied up in the rocks than there is to having Skeptic out and about with the other villains. I wouldn't be surprised if the author forgot about Skeptic and then just kind of slid him in here. Now, if the author forgot about Skeptic though, that does say something about how much he cares about the Paranormal Liberation Front. If that's the case, I have an interesting little detail coming up because Mr. Compress also says something very interesting about the Liberation Front. Anyway, Compress here says that he's going to save his team, and you know what? I think that legitimately, I think Compress could pull it off, although I'm leaning more towards the villains getting caught at the end here. Anyway, page 13 is the Harima page, and I just want to show you the design. This is Harima now, and this is Harima before when we got him in the Gentle pages. So if you look here, all that really changed was just the makeup isn't as pronounced as it used to be. So that's pretty neat. Otherwise, the character is very similar to what he is now. Page 14 is the Dabi Nope page, where he just says, "I'm leaving." And people, so I got the comments during the live stream that people were saying that this isn't consistent with Dabi or that it's out of character. And it was actually really interesting because before we knew the full context, I was saying that, okay, if the spoilers are saying that Dabi runs away, then I could make that work, and I'm sure the people on the live stream will remember. I can make that work by saying that Endeavor is unconscious. And then, you know, lo and behold, we have Endeavor being unconscious being the reason that Dabi's pulling out. And so my point on this page is that I feel if you're saying that this is out of character for Dabi, I think maybe there's a possibility that maybe you're not getting what Horikoshi is writing with Dabi. Because for me, this is incredibly consistent. And, you know, let's put away the most obvious factor that would justify this. In Miguel's words, a commenter, Dabi's insane. Him doing this is not that addict. This is the problem with insane characters. You can justify anything with the flag of insanity. But let's go a step further and really see why this is in character. 1. The statement, Dabi doesn't have good follow-through, has been true since the beginning of this arc, and is still true at this point. You read this page, do you see follow through? No. This is consistent. Dabi runs away a lot. Dabi doesn't finish the job. People always tell me like, hey, Dabi almost killed Hawks. You should be a little bit nicer to him. It's like, yeah, he almost killed Hawks. He didn't pull it off. You know what else is an almost? Like, I almost got a passing grade. It doesn't matter if I almost got it. It's still a failure. Dabi still doesn't have follow through. And the other thing that's really come out with this recent bit is that Dabi is obsessed with Endeavor. You look at it, Dabi's dialogues. When you have a man willing to burn up his brother just to get a reaction out of Endeavor, who at this point is pretty much the guy's idol. When you have that kind of mentality, the man saying, yo, he's not looking at me anymore, I'm gonna leave. It's consistent. It is realistically, it is very consistent. And again, I just want to like really, I really want to land on the thing. Like, Dabi's insane. I mean, yeah, this is the guy who's willing to kill his brother, who also suffered. Dabi's a person who has tunnel vision here, and at the end of that tunnel vision is Endeavor and his hot bod. Let's face it, Dabi probably has an Endeavor body pillow, and he probably hugs it, strangles it, burns it. It depends on how Dabi's feeling. Some days he feels a little bit angry, some days he doesn't. Dabi's obsessed with Endeavor, as Miguel says. Dabi's insane. This is entirely justified. I enjoy making fun of Dabi. I really hope that at the end of this, though, the author has the heroes reveal Dabi's misdeeds here, and I do legitimately hope the villains call out Dabi. And I do legitimately hope Dabi ends up with a pie on his face. Page 15 is actually really important. If there was anything that sealed the fate of the Liberation Front, it's Compress's monologue here. So what I want to say is be ready. if there are any character designs that you liked in the Liberation Front, get ready for Shigaraki to potentially just dust the majority of them. Because from what I'm seeing, to me, it feels like all those unique designs are pretty much in the gutter now. The moment you have Compress changing from Paranormal Liberation Front to League of Villains, that's a big move. After seeing this, I'm really wondering, you know, in the past, I floated the idea that that seeing Skeptic being taken away and only Skeptic probably meant that Shigaraki was cutting loose from the rest of the organization. And I imagine some people, any of the stragglers that follow Shigaraki, maybe they were just going to get dusted. But now I'm thinking, like, maybe, you know, given that the Liberation Front was pretty much the ultimate plot device for the villains, and when I say that, I mean, look at Villain Academia. Villain Academia started with the premise of, oh man, the villains are poor. They need money and resources. Oh man, what are they going to do? Oh wait, you're saying that this company that happens to have everything the villains need right now is putting themselves in a location where the villains can actually touch them? Right? At the end of the day, the Liberation Front was a means to an end to make Shigaraki seem more credible and to give him more power. So in that sense, what's going to be interesting here is going to be whether it's going to be seeing whether or not the Liberation Front starts as a plot device and ends up as a plot device. Right now, I'm seeing a future where maybe Skeptic is forced to give all the assets to Shigaraki, and then once Skeptic has done that, maybe Shigaraki dusts him. It's going to be really interesting because Shigaraki is the kind of person that would try to maybe kill All for One and the Doctor after they give him power. So, you know, if Skeptic just happens to give Shigaraki power, is Shigaraki going to dust Skeptic? Well, given that they're cutting loose from the from the Paranormal Liberation Front, I feel like maybe I don't see Skeptic going along with Shigaraki if Redestro is out of the picture, right? Yeah, no, man, it's going to be interesting. Right now, though, I think it's more likely to believe that Horikoshi is going to cut loose from the majority of the Liberation Front. I feel like a good chunk of the Liberation Front has decay in their future. And if we look at just the way that Horikoshi has treated villains in the past, this is not a good track record. Like, if you think about it, all the villains that came with Shigaraki, irrelevant. During the USJ arc, irrelevant. The villains that were in the Vanguard group during the camp arc, well, 3 of them were pretty much no names. One of them was just like, they had such little thought put into them that their names were their quirks, right? Then you had Shizaki's group. Do you even remember anyone that isn't the guy that fought with Fat Gum? Right? Like, these characters, like, villains are not treated well in Hero Academia. Horikoshi doesn't care about villains. Compress in all his naked glory, saying it's his final performance, that does kind of feel like this is the end of Compress. But then you have Shigaraki getting set up to be awakened, and then you have Mirio being the one to approach. Honestly, Mirio is probably the best person to approach. So now at this point, we have to talk about what's going to happen next. Well, you know, I'm feeling that Shigaraki might dust people. Like, look where Shigaraki's hand is here. I know that's his busted hand, actually. Horikoshi, there's too many fingers on that hand. Let me just very quickly go and see if Shigaraki's... Let me just remind myself which hand is Shigaraki missing fingers on. Okay, so I'm looking at 289, and yeah, it's his... He's definitely missing fingers on his left hand. So I think, given that the device is still on 289, I think that might be just a little bit of an art error. We'll know next week for sure. But it doesn't matter, because Shigaraki can propagate decay even without his fingers, because we saw that in Villain Fight. But yeah, no, man, with Shigaraki, right now, if I'm looking at this, I feel like Shigaraki could propagate decay from Gigantomachia. And I mean, yeah, it's gonna kill Giganto, which is one of his best resources. But I'm not assuming that Shigaraki is all that smart right now. And given that Shigaraki can control decay well enough such that he didn't destroy the high ends when he used the first wave, I feel that he could create decay in such a way that it doesn't affect Mr. Compressor Spinner. So yeah, man, if I was to say something, my first guess is he makes decay happen. Decay spreads through Giganto. Meteor is able to avoid it and like really punch him. And then we have a situation where decay is spreading once more. At that point, the reason I'm kind of going for this one, this is so hard to premise. Okay, I think I would enjoy seeing the villains ultimately get caught. So Spinner, Dabi, Shigaraki, get them all caught, throw them in Tartarus, because then we can have a very simple prison arc, because it'll probably revolve around those characters getting out. Maybe Toga's the one that gets them out, and then that way we get the Toga separation. In this particular situation, I would also like seeing Mirio being the one to knock out Shigaraki. I think that would be really cool for everyone that's about to get dusted. If Shigaraki propagates the K, I think it would be cool if like Pony and Monoma show up. You know, it's just really interesting. Pony was a character that had an entire page dedicated to the fact that she could lift people into the air with her horns. If you bring in Pony and Monoma and they both have the horn quirk, it wouldn't be that hard to just get people into the air. Heck, man, throw Gentle in here as well. Get Gentle into the air with elasticity. I think that would be really interesting if you have these last minute heroes coming in to save the day here. And then we finally get to know what Monoma's doing. That's the one that's nearest to my heart. If we're talking about something that lets the villains get away, it'd be cool if Shigaraki has potentially a warp quirk. I mean, at the end of the day, we're copying quirks everywhere, right? The Doctor had a copy of Twice's quirk, so I think it'd be really neat if Shigaraki has warp, because then he can just get everyone away. That still allows them to separate from Toga, and then that allows Shigaraki to make a proper counterattack. At this point in time, I do feel that we have to get some action at the jail, right? We have Kurogiri there, we have Stain there. If we're talking about cards that we haven't had played, we still don't know why the author keeps bringing up Stain and having All Might's talks. When you have that kind of dialogue coming up, it's one of those things that says that, well, Stain's going to be relevant again in the future. And so I think putting these guys in there and putting them in a prison break would be the best situation to actually bring them into conflict with Stain once more. And at this point, I think people like Spinner, they need to come into conflict with Stain, because Stain is the only one that can really talk to these people and say, like, you guys are stupid, or something along those lines. Anyway, everybody, I think I'm going to leave it there. It's an exciting time. The big thing is, what is Shigaraki going to do next week? If he starts the K, that's going to be hardcore, man. If he starts another wave of the K, it's going to be hardcore. Mirio being the one to approach it, though, that's the thing. Mirio being the one to approach it is the thing that tells us that there might be a thing coming out that only Mirio can deal with. It'd be funny if, like, next week we start up, Shigaraki starts the K, Mirio dodges it, he looks behind, like he goes in for the punch, knocks out Shigaraki, and then he looks behind him and it's like, oh no, the K is still going. It's like, oh my gosh, that'll be interesting. We'll have to see. Everyone, let me know what you thought down below, and until next time, I hope you have an absolutely great day.